So I have sort of a unique job, and then, you know, I have both the user experience, so I'm responsible for creating, thank you very much. Thank you. Let's see, does it work? Yes, awesome. So I have to make, I'm in charge of the user experience, so I have to make the sort of deep emotional connection with our users, and most of our users are internal, in-house. But I'm also responsible for the engineering, so all the cold, rational, technical pieces of the work that we do. So I have both of these, right? And when you think about music, there's the moment when the artist is creating that music, and then it gets to you, and you're listening to it in your car, in your headphones, on your computer, however it comes to you. And so there's that emotional connection that you have, right? But in order to get that music from the artists to you, right, there is a lot of technical and operational things that we have. There's about 300 applications that we have sort of running through the backbone of the enterprise. And 300 is a bad number. The number should be a lot lower. And so we kind of have the other, the problem at the other end of the spectrum, which is Warner Music Group has been around for decades and decades and decades, right? And so we've acquired companies and bought companies and sold companies, and so there's kind of this accrual of all these systems that we have, and we have to sort of contend with this as we go through it. We're a global IT organization. To put us in context, we help the people who help the people who help the artists. So I don't know Ed Sheeran, I don't know Bruno Mars. If I really, really wanted to, I could call somebody who might know somebody who would know them, right? And we're expecting that over the next few years, we're going to be building a lot of software to replace those 300 applications, right? We're going to turn them off sort of selectively as we go, and so we're going to have to build a lot of software. When I came into Warner Music Group, there wasn't a me before me, right? I came in and I was charged with building a user experience group with sort of a consumer-minded frame of reference. But like I said, it's all back office, right? I have been a long proponent of lean UX, right? Of getting UX, sort of as the quote goes from Smashing Magazine, out of the artifact business, right? And making sure that as much of the work is as meaningful and impactful as possible. And I like it because it's about speed, right? So I don't know if there's any college football fans in the audience. I'm a huge up-tempo fan. It gets you more shots to do whatever you want. So I'm, you know, I'm all about speed, I'm all about tempo. Speed gets you those iterations, it gets you that cycle time, right? And so the more iterations you have, the more opportunities you have for feedback, the more feedback you have, the more improvement, the better product, right, at the end of the day. And so, you know, all of this stuff is about that kind of tempo and cycling quickly. One of the things that I've worked on sort of over the years is trying to compress the time that it takes between I got sort of an idea about what it is I'm going to design and then the spec, the build-ready spec that the development group is going to put together. And when you think about compression, there's really kind of three parts to this puzzle. One part is the tools, right? It's impossible to get a room full of UX folks and not have an argument about balsamic this or InDesign that or what have you, right? And so one of the challenges with tools is you want the right tool for the right job. But every time you change tools, it costs you some time, right? And so there's this tension between what is your right tool and how do you compress it. So what we netted out at Warner Music Group is we go from paper and pencil sketches into InDesign. And we've compressed our wireframes and comps yes, we don't use Photoshop, our comps into InDesign, and we have a very structured template and how that works, right? We're still fiddling around with prototyping, and we typically do it sort of as needed or sort of on demand. And there was a lot of debate about the tool set. I believe one of the designers said, you can have Illustrator when you pry it out of my cold, dead hands, right? And she's a big Walking Dead fan, so I think we're okay. The second place where you get compression is in resources, right? In headcount, in people, right? I've spent a lot of time sort of experimenting with sort of hybrid roles. Can you be both UX and graphic designer? Can you be both copywriter and UX? Can I find somebody who's really sort of really good at one skill and just kind of good enough at the other one that I can bring this down so I can have a smaller team that can move faster? And the third place where you can find compression and get that speed is what you choose to work on, right? The internet has voted on a registration flow, although some people reinvent it every day. But at some point, maybe you don't actually need to reinvent it. You can take what the collective intelligence and goodwill of the internet has sort of picked and build that. And then spend the rest of your time really focused on the most valuable and important aspects that make the most impact to either your users or the business, right? And so you have to be selective about what things do you fuss over, right? And at some point, you kind of let the easy, obvious things, hey, the internet voted, I'm going to pick that. And so if you can pick those three things and kind of put them together, you can start to get a lot of compression and a lot of speed in your design cycle so that you can cover that design space quickly. And then along the way, I took over the engineering team, right? And it's a little scary, a little challenging. I'm the design guy and I'm running a bunch of devs. And I don't know if any of you've noticed, it says awesome UX in the code there, right? When I had my guys first do this code, they only gave UX good, right? So I can testify to the value of code reviews because you'll catch stuff like that. When I took over the engineering team, we had to cover the standard sort of hurdles, right? So communication, collaboration. The UX folks were worried that I didn't love them anymore and I'd abandoned them. The engineering folks were worried about a design guy who was going to make everything, you know, perfect and pristine, and they were going to have to obsess over every little pixel, right? But eventually we kind of worked through and got ourselves in a good place. At this point, having both design and engineering, I own all of execution, right? I'm responsible for that software that gets out the door, right? And so what I was doing with the UX side in terms of compressing and getting speed out of the process, I now was looking at how do I do this for all of software, right? So if you go and take constraint theory, it tells you, hey, go look at the place where you've got a bottleneck and then figure out how to scale that. Oh look, Google Drive. Anyways, so this is what we get, and you don't have to follow this terribly closely. But what we ended up doing is saying on the front end, we're using InDesign, and we have a very structured sort of template and tool set there, right? And that is tightly coupled to our Bootstrap and Angular framework, so that whatever we design, I know directly translates into the code, right? Everything is built on sort of our own platform that we built, so we get all of the logging and all that other stuff, you know, sort of built in. And then for the back end, we built out this thing that we call backend as service, which allows us to sort of rapidly create entities and do all of the CRUD operations, the create, retrieve, update, delete, all that stuff sort of rapidly so that I don't need a lot of back-end resources, right? And the only part of this puzzle that isn't really sort of accelerated and compressed is the middleware, right, is the business logic. And that is the part that you kind of don't expect to be able to compress because that's the part that really matters, right? That's the part that the business cares about and that you care about, right? And it's the part that is most custom. And you let everything else that is standard just kind of either get automated or take care of itself. So this is our design toolkit, right? It's in InDesign, it has the templates, it's based on Bootstrap, it's all themed sort of appropriately for us and our sort of branding, and all the designers, like I said, debated about it, and we finally netted out with this. And they built it, right? And they own it. And we have something called Dev Portal, right? So this is all that stuff that we just talked about maps to all the components that we are building. And we have code snippets and guides on how to use the services and the APIs and all that good stuff, right? So we built this so that when we bring in developers, right, they can rapidly come onto the platform, onto our framework, and there's very little training, right? Again, get a little compression because we're going to take this. Now, every drop down that they have, every grid, every line graph, whatever it is, it's all set and standard, right? We can kind of do this because we're in a controlled environment. We're not out on the wild internet. We're in an enterprise environment, right? But we get that compression. So this is what we used it on. There's an application that we refer to as the YouTube app, right? We have folks in our marketing group who worry about promotional campaigns and the 2,400 artist channels that we manage. So Bruno Mars's channel, Ed Sheeran's channel, all those guys, right? And they previously were manually going into YouTube and updating Bruno Mars's channel, right? And so we wanted to give them a tool that they could use to do sort of bulk updates for all the channels, right? It took us about 6 sprints. We run in 2-week sprints, right? It took us about 6 sprints to do this application. But we were mostly done with the front end by the 3rd sprint, right? And most of the challenge that we had was working with the YouTube API. And while Google's a wonderful company, the API is a little finicky, I can put it that way, right? So these are all the components. You don't actually have to care about all that stuff. The only important thing is that we estimate that it saved us about 145 days of work, right, in this application. And if you think about it, 145 days is a 5-person team for about 3 sprints. So this application only took us 6 sprints. If we didn't have this advantage, if we didn't have this compression and speed, it probably would have taken us 9 sprints or something like that, maybe 8, who knows. But that's a huge compression, right? I'll show you a little bit of the app. I had to talk to corporate communications a couple times about showing this, but it's a fairly straightforward app, right? On the left side, the users pick which channels they want to work with and manage sort of in bulk. On the right side is the workspace where they manage all the channels. On the top is all their settings about whether it's an in-video ad or watermark or references, and they use this thing all the time because they use it for promotions. If they want to have a new thing about Ed Sheeran, they can pick a whole bunch of channels, have that sort of in-video or that you might also like experience on those channels. They can bring it up and they can bring it down, right? And they can do it very fast. And one of the challenges with this application was we also had to work with the business because they hadn't worked with it like this before. They didn't have this kind of speed. And so for them, it was they had to kind of adjust their process and adjust their thinking with that ability to kind of manage things at bulk. And, oh, I really can manage 1,100 channels all at once and go pow, right? That was sort of an eye-opening or a moment of epiphany for these guys. Next, we're going to build a whole lot more kind of applications. We're also gearing up to maybe open source some of the tools that we have. And, that's about it. Questions? Questions? Oh, all right. Run it over.
Hi, Stewart. I really want to know what your background is before this job because it's a pretty fascinating crossover.
The 2-minute resume. I have a bachelor's in cognitive psychology with a focus on human factors. I have a master's in human-computer interaction. both of them from the University of Michigan. It's the big college football fan, right? I worked for a few years at AT&T as a human factors engineer. After that, I worked for about 12 years at a company called Digitas, where I finished running UX for the New York region. And then I kind of got tired of agency life, and Warner Music Group was kind of building up this new group to build this new platform, to go build a whole bunch of modern software to turn off all the legacy applications. Like, I have AS400 stuff, and if you don't know what it is, it's awful. It's the green screen stuff. So, and I came into that company, and I worked there, and we had a little trouble for various sundry reasons keeping our heads of engineering around, and after about a year or so, the second one left, and I raised my hand and said, can I help? Can I try? Can I do this for a little while? And I've always sort of played software architect on TV, but I don't know all this stuff, right? I just know how to pick people who do, right? So there are definitely meetings I get into where, like, halfway through the meeting, I'm like, I don't know what you're talking about. You're talking about VPNs and subnets, and that's kind of out of my range. Let me go get my guy, right? And do that. So there's a piece of this, which is once you learn how to run a group and run an organization, a lot of those skills translate. Even though the domain and the topic, you get to points, and as long as you're transparent about your own ignorance, then you can kind of bounce around and run a bunch of different things, right? That's at least what I'm figuring out.
Two questions for me. Who's the coolest artist you've ever met?
The coolest artist I ever met? I once met Timothy Leary. I don't know you'd call him an artist. But from a famous person point of view, I would say that would be the number one.
Cool. And then what do you look for when hiring designers?
When I hire designers, I look at the portfolio first. If I don't see anything I love in the portfolio, I will not bother with the resume, right? I will look through the portfolio. And when I look through the portfolio, understand that I will probably disagree with your design solution for whatever problem you stated. But I want to know what your opinion was. I want to be able to sort of feel your point of view in the work. So if I see the problem statement and I can understand your thinking and how you presented it, that's sort of what I look for in a portfolio.
Do you like portfolios that show how people thought through a problem, or do you like just seeing, the 3 things they've designed that they're most proud of?
I need to see how you thought through the problem, because like I said, odds are I will disagree with your solution, right? Your solution might be right, but I've never met a creative director type who looks at work and doesn't have a comment, right? It's just in the breed. So.
You have a question in the back.
Dan.
All right. Cool. How's it going?
Oh.
Do you think that consolidating technology into like a universal platform is a market-wide trend, or just something that you wanted to do? And then secondly, related to that, what's your rationale for building that in-house instead of buying a product, like a software product?
So, yes, I think it's a trend. And it's funny, the decision to whether or not to build or buy happened before me. Right? And so I think there was an intent in the very, very beginning to be very bleeding edge in the technology. We have, Cloud Foundry, we have Cassandra, we have like all the RabbitMQ, we've got all the cool stuff, right? I don't know that if I was making that decision today, that I would be as bleeding edge at the time, or if I wouldn't seriously consider a buy option. I think at the time there was this idea that if we built it ourselves, that we could actually turn it into a SaaS offering, right? And sort of roll it out to the marketplace. I think that dream has either been put aside or has been put off for a long time.
Hi, my name's Maria. When I was hired last year at my current company, I'm building out something similar where we're standardizing a lot of the components and also building the framework for the company so we can be faster in getting products out to market. I've been doing this for a year, and we've released iterations on components that design, UX, and development can use, but we're getting a lot of pushback. And I want to know if you guys had any challenges when you did start standardizing. What were the initial reactions? Because people feel they can't be creative because you've standardized something, but you can focus on the bigger picture instead of what a button looks like or a drop-down looks like, so forth.
All right, so yes, we had worlds of trouble along the way, and we still have trouble, right? I would say from the designers in the group, and there's a designer on the team over there, and so whatever I can say, she can correct me and tell you how it really is, but the designers were actually pretty good, right? Partly because when I brought them in, some of them, I've been working in this market for 15 years, so I know a lot of people, and when I brought them in, I said, this is what we're doing, right? I didn't come in and say, oh, you're going to build lots of pretty things and all that good stuff. I was like, we are building an optimized speed system. And those who've worked with me before, like I said, even at Digitas, I was always about like tempo, 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 right? So they kind of knew what they were getting. The biggest challenge that we have and sort of still have is the IT organizations kind of before us was like any enterprise IT organization in that the business hates them and tries to work around them, right? And we're like, no, 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 I know that other people, murdered your puppy, but we'll be good this time, right? And so there is that level of sort of building trust with the business that we have to do every single day.
I have more questions, but I will think about it.
Sure. Probably all we have time for, but that was awesome, Stu. Thank you very much.
Cool. Thank you.